On today's edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the UFC 294 main event champion Islam Makhachev, Charles Oliveira, for the 155-pound strap. And if you've never watched a show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles, and then I'll give you my pick at the end. Some of this stuff may have relevance, it may not, but I like to look at a lot of different options when it comes to picking fights. And at the end, let me know who you're picking and how you see this fight playing out. Let's do a quick tail of the tape. Of course, this rematch from last year. Islam Makhachev, 24-1. Charles Oliveira, 34-9. 32 years old for Islam, 34 for Oliveira. That's at the time they'll be fighting. Islam's actually going to be still 31 at the time we're recording this. Both 5'10" and a 70.5 inch reach for Islam, 74 for Charles Oliveira. Let's start first with the current lightweight champion Islam Makhachev and go through a bunch of cool stats about him. So I mentioned it there. Islam gonna be is 24-1. Forgot to mention this fight's gonna be taking place in Abu Dhabi. He's got Islam has 4 knockouts, 11 submissions, and 9 decisions. He is currently 31 years old, like I see there, but like I mentioned, September 27th, going to be turning 32. He is 5'10", so he's 2 years younger than Charles Oliveira in this fight. That's the only advantage sort of on paper that he has in terms of physicality and all that stuff. He is the current lightweight champion. Like I mentioned, he's got fight of the night 2 times against Arman Tsarukyan and Alex Volkanovski. He's got performance of the night 1 time against Charles Oliveira. He has the least significant strikes absorbed per minute in UFC lightweight division history at 1.24. He is tied with Charles Oliveira for the 3rd longest win streak in UFC lightweight division history at 11. Looking way back at Islam's career, did not have an amateur debut, went straight to the pros way back in August of 2010, made his UFC debut in May of 2015, and then obviously is 13-1 in the UFC. He's got 7 stoppages in his career. Some notable wins for Islam, and you guys remember I did a video on Islam's past opponents, which you can find here on this channel, but some notable wins. Chris Wade, I would put that in there just because Wade was 11-2 at the time, also very young. Nick Lentz was a veteran and I believe ranked at one point. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, can't remember, but either way, I remember that being a big win at the time. Arman Tsarukyan was making his debut, but looking back now, that was a pretty big win in terms of where Arman's ranked right now. Davey Ramos was 10-2 at the time. That was a pretty important win. Drew Dober, ranked opponent, got a win there. Thiago Moises, pretty notable guy in terms of a victory, ranked opponent as well. Dan Hooker, ranked opponent, was on short notice. Bobby Green, ranked opponent that was on short notice. I don't think Green's in the rankings now, but was ranked at one point. And then obviously Oliveira, the former champ, and Alex Volkanovski, the current featherweight champ. So Islam's got a lot of good wins on his resume in terms of who he's fought. In terms of ranked opponents, so I think the only ones that were ranked at the time that he's fought would have been Oliveira and Volkanovski. Actually, I think Hooker might have been ranked as well. Can't remember, but either way, that's the one sort of critique of Islam is hasn't beat a lot of ranked opponents, but a lot of these wins have aged quite well. Like I mentioned, his only loss is to Adriano Martins, fight that he lost via knockout in the very first round. Islam's had a bunch of layoffs in his career, and we'll explain sort of why after that's happened. Going from Adriano Martins to Chris Wade, there was a 350-day layoff. Going from Chris Wade to Nick Lentz, there was a 343-day layoff. Going from Cajun Johnson to Arman Tsarukyan, there was a 266-day layoff. And then going from this fight, Volkanovski to Oliveira, there is a 252-day layoff. So not a big layoff, but just have to mention that anyways. If you remember, you're supposed to fight Drew Dober the first time at UFC on Fox 19, tested positive for a banned substance at the weigh-ins. Got to mention that. I was supposed to fight Michel Prazeres. I had an injury in that fight, which was undisclosed. Was supposed to fight Francisco Trinaldo. Was pulled from that fight. Not exactly sure why. It was at the, that might have been the passing of Habib's father. I can't remember exactly if that was the case there. And then what was the other one? Supposed to fight Rafa Dos Anjos testing positive for COVID, so that wasn't his fault. And then had an injury against RDA, which I think people forget about. People always blame RDA as being the one who pulled out of that fight, but that was the first time was just due to COVID. The other time was an injury that he suffered. Then was supposed to fight RDA again. Had Dos Anjos had an injury in that one, and then was supposed to fight Beneil Dariush having an ankle injury in that one. So that's kind of the reason why there's been a few layoffs in Islam's career, but doesn't seem to matter. This guy has not lost in a very long time. Now, Islam's only had one close fight in his UFC career. We're going to go take a look at that on MMA Decisions. That was the fight against Alex Volkanovski. And if you go to MMA Decisions, you can see how the media has scored certain fights. And again, overwhelming amount of people scoring this fight for Islam. So there was 23 media members scoring the fight for Islam against Volkanovski, and just 6 media members scoring it for 23 media members scoring the fight for Islam Makhachev, 6 media members scoring it for Volkanovski. Make sure I didn't get that mixed up. Yeah, I thought this was a close fight. Again, majority of people feeling like Islam won. I don't think there's any controversy there. I don't think it was a robbery. I personally scored the fight 3-2 for Islam. We're going to actually go through that fight here real quick, just to kind of give you my take. I did go back and watch the fight. So like I mentioned, I had it 3-2 for Islam. I can understand people saying 4-1, but for Islam, but I had it 3-2 personally. First round, Islam clearly took, in my opinion. He stunned Volkanovski and was working to get that rear naked choke, which he didn't end up getting, but still, that was all Makhachev in that first round. The second round was also Islam's. I gave him a 10-9 in that one. Volkanovski did stun Makhachev, but immediately he transitioned to a takedown. The takedown was key in that round, and then Makhachev himself wobbled Volkanovski, but Volkanovski did recover and get knocked out there. Makhachev had the most significant things going on in that round, so that's why I gave him 10-9 in that one. The third round I gave to Volkanovski. That was a round where Volkanovski connected with the right hand and a hard leg kick. He also landed some hooks and was really pressuring Islam in that round. I think that's the round that most people feel like Volkanovski did win. There was the fourth round, which again I gave 10-9 to Islam. Islam landed a 1-2. Makhachev did get a takedown in that one. He also had the body triangle. Didn't do a lot of damage, but still won the round. A lot of people debate this round because Islam didn't do much damage in that round, but it's about control when it comes to a fight like that. So that's why Islam got that round, in my opinion. And if you look at the rules, that's typically how they scored that as well. And then the fifth round, I also gave to I gave to Volkanovski. If you remember, he had a hard leg kick. Ended up getting he ended up hurting Islam with a left hand, and he got some ground and pound in that round. I think rounds 5 and rounds 3 were clearly Volkanovski's round, in my opinion. Again, if you want to debate how close the round was, you want to say that Islam took one of the rounds, I'm here for it. I thought it was, like I said, a very close fight, but I think overall I did not have an issue with Islam Makhachev getting the decision. I am not in the camp that thought that was a robbery. I thought it was a close fight, but I thought Islam ultimately did end up winning it. Let's have a couple look at some stats here for Islam Makhachev. Just we always do this. You look at significant strikes landed per minute in the UFC. Islam's got a significant strikes of 2.35. Now, part of the reason this number is not higher is because Islam does typically wrestle his opponents, so you're not going to see a ton of strikes compared to some other people. His striking accuracy is at 59%, so he does land a lot. Striking defense is at 61%, so it doesn't get hit that much. And then if you look at his average takedowns landed per minute, 3.24, that's pretty high. So he is typically getting the takedown there. His takedown accuracy is at 60%, which is good. And check this out, takedown defense, 90%. Doesn't get much better than that. He's got to have one of the highest takedown defense rates in the UFC. So that's why this guy does not lose very often. So that's pretty much everything you need to know about the lightweight champion, Islam Makhachev. Again, really tough opponent, one of the best fighters in the UFC. And I'm also here for the argument of people saying he's the best fighter in the UFC. I don't argue that. He's looked so dominant in the first fight with Charles Oliveira. I don't think there's much to debate. I didn't even mention the first fight with Charles because, that's a fight that, again, I thought, he just dominated from bell to bell. Charles was not in that fight at all. But let's talk about Charles Oliveira. He's getting this rematch here. You can see it there. Charles Oliveira, 34-9. He's 33 years old. Going to be 34 on October 17th. So that will be before the fight. So they're both actually turning a year older once they fight each other. Charles Oliveira, you can see there, 5'10" with a 74-inch reach. He'll have a 3.5-inch reach advantage in the rematch. He's currently the #1 ranked lightweight. He's the former lightweight champion. He's a third-degree BJJ black belt. He has the most submission wins in UFC history at 16. He's got the most submission wins in UFC lightweight history at 10. He's got most finishes in UFC history at 20. He's got performance of the night bonus 13 times. We don't need to go through all the names, but some of the ones that stand out here would be Kevin Lee, Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, and Beneil Dariush. He's got fight of the night 3 times against Nick Lentz twice and Frankie Edgar. Oliveira made his amateur debut way back in November of 2007, so a bit of an experience gap there in terms of Islam. Made his pro debut shortly after that, March 2008. Made his UFC debut in August of 2010, which is crazy. That's how long Oliveira's been fighting. He fought Darren Elkins in his UFC debut, and Elkins is, as far as I know, still, or I can't remember if Elkins retired or not, but that's still, just shows you how long ago Oliveira made that UFC debut. Some notable wins for Charles Oliveira include Jeremy Stevens, Miles Jury, Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, Beneil Dariush, and Justin Gaethje. Defeated Dariush in his last fight. That was at UFC 289. Some key losses. He's got a lot, but that's what's going to happen if you've been in the UFC since 2010. You're going to have some losses unless you're, really amazing. But Jim Miller, Donald Cerrone, Cub Swanson, Frankie Edgar, Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis, Ricardo Lamas, Paul Felder, and obviously Islam in the last fight. But some of those were in different weight classes. Remember, he had issues cutting weight. He was trying to make 145. Actually started his career at welterweight, fought 7 times at 145, missed weight 4 times, missed once at 155 in the fight against Gaethje by 0.5 pounds. That's why he was stripped of the title. And yeah, you have to hit 155 on the mark to be able to fight there. So that's why the belt was stripped. So technically he missed weight, but in a regular fight, it would have counted as, him making weight because you're allowed, 1 pound allowance, but not in title fights. So there we go. For the most part, Oliveira's been active. I went back and looked here if there's any like major gaps or any major layoffs in his UFC career. Not really compared to Islam, but again, just fighting here in June and now fighting this fight in October. So been pretty active overall, Charles Oliveira, that is. Charles Oliveira has had a few injuries. He was supposed to fight Jeremy Larson in October of 2013. Don't really know who that is, but ended up having a thigh injury in that one. And he's supposed to fight Nick Lentz. One of the Nick Lentz fights had an illness. That was back in 2014. So lately he has not had any fights that he's had to really withdraw from. Did have to withdraw from the Dariush fight, but I don't think that was injury related. It was something else, if I'm not mistaken. So there we go. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm mistaken. He had an injury against Dariush. It was supposed to fight on 288, ended up getting moved to 289. So my apologies. Did have an injury there, but nothing significant. They were able to fight at UFC 289, and Oliveira looked great in that fight. Oliveira's not had any close fights. In fact, if you look at Oliveira's stats overall, he's only gone the distance. He only has 9% of his wins by decision. 11% of his losses are also by decision. So does not go the distance at all very often. So keep that in mind when you're kind of looking at this fight. Let's look at Charles Oliveira's stats a little bit here. So you can see there, significant strikes per minute, 3.54, which makes sense. Oliveira does typically keep his fight standing. Is not a takedown guy like Islam as much. Striking accuracy is at 53%, which is decent. Striking defense is at 51. He does get hit a bit, right? So not below 50%, but not great either. Average takedowns landed per minute is 2.32. So he does get some takedowns, not as much as Islam, obviously, but his takedown accuracy only 40%. So doesn't get the takedown when he's trying it often. And then takedown defense is at 55%, but not like 90% like Islam Makhachev. So just keep that in mind. Probably going to get a takedown or two. Islam's probably going to get a takedown or two in this fight. Let's have a look at the odds. Right now, you can see most books having Islam almost a 4-1 favorite. The odds last time, I want to say, were a bit closer. Let me go have a quick look at those. Just always curious about these things. So the first Islam fight, oh no, they were both the same. So yeah, Islam's priced a little bit higher this time around. You can see the closing odds had Islam at minus 245. Right now, the odds are, right now it's at minus 310 around there. So could end up being a little bit lower there. And then on Tapology, we look at the fan votes in case people are interested in that. I always like mentioning that. Only 66% having Makhachev, 34% having Oliveira. So, and again, what was the first fight? I'm trying to remember how the majority of people scored that one going in. I think it was closer. Yeah, so 66% had Oliveira winning, 34% having Makhachev, which is interesting, right? Because the odds had Islam winning, but then the fan votes here in Tapology actually had Oliveira winning. So that's interesting with 66. So the odds are flipped here, or the picks are flipped here, with Makhachev having 66%, Oliveira having 34. Okay, so who am I going with in this fight? I don't think this is a surprise to many people if you've been watching my live streams. But I'm going with Islam Makhachev in this fight. You have to. Okay, there's a variety of reasons why I like Islam here. But let me first just say my official prediction for this fight is Islam Makhachev, 4th round submission. Now, he submitted Charles in the 2nd round in their last fight. I really don't think the fight is going to be as bad for Charles as the first fight was. I mean, that was just a really bad performance. And you saw against Beneil Dariush, I mean, that was a really good win. I know Dariush had some success early in that fight, but Oliveira, I mean, he finished Dariush in the 1st round. That was a very good win. And if you look at Oliveira's overall body of work over the last couple fights, the Islam fight really stands out as just a lopsided loss. But I mean, these are good wins. Dariush, Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler. I mean, Gaethje just, himself coming off a big win over Poirier in his last fight, Michael Chandler. These are all very good wins. I know there's a lot of fans out there who like to downplay these victories and say they aren't quality wins. I disagree with that. I'm going to push back on that. Those were all good wins and they were all finishes. So even though Oliveira gets hit a lot, he's got some, obviously some defensive issues. He is still getting it done overall. And the Makhachev fight really sticks out. But Makhachev is just that good. I think that's really what it comes down to. I know Oliveira himself said, oh, maybe he had like an off night. I mean, I think Islam just had his number, and I think he has his number in this fight as well. So a couple of reasons why I'm going 4th round submission. Number one, I think Oliveira will look better than he did in the last fight. I think there's got to be some improvements there. I mean, he's been in the cage with Islam. You have to think that he's going to have a better showing this time around. 46% of Islam Makhachev's wins are by submission. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind in this fight. That's kind of why I was going with the submission thing. So 46% of his wins are by submission, 38% are by decision. I don't think this fight's going the distance. Oliveira is, like I said, a guy that does not go the distance hardly ever. And Islam does win most of his wins by submission. So I could see another situation like last time where maybe he catches Charles. I could see the fight playing out similarly to last time in the sense of how he finishes it. I just think it's going to be a little bit later in the fight. 88% of Oliveira's losses have been by stoppage. It's a key thing here. So Oliveira, again, does not go the distance. He does get finished by his opponents. 88% is a pretty high number. I think it's likely that Islam finishes again. The other thing is this fight's in Abu Dhabi. I did a video on this already. That does favor Islam. The fans are going to be on his side, right? It's mostly Muslim crowd. They're going to be cheering for their guy. I get it. So I think that does play a little bit of a role as well. I mean, if this fight was in Brazil, maybe that's going to help Oliveira a bit. I don't know. But I do think some of that stuff does play a role as well. So it's in Abu Dhabi. And again, this rematch is happening just a year later. I think they should have done this rematch down the line. But the fact that it's happening, less than a year, well, about a year exactly to the first fight, I don't think there's enough for us to sort of say that Oliveira really has his number, has more time to prepare for it as well. It's only 133 days that Oliveira had the Dariush fight to him fighting Islam, which isn't that long. Like it's enough for a full camp, but again, you're fighting a guy that you got absolutely dominated in your first fight, and you only get 133 days to prepare. To me, that's not a lot. And let's not forget that Oliveira came out. I spoke to him at the UFC Expo, and this was making the headlines during International Fight Week at UFC 290. Oliveira flat out says he won't be ready to fight Islam in October. That's a red flag as far as I'm concerned. So he's not ready to fight, but then he accepts the fight. Was he pressured into doing it? Did the UFC make the announcement before he signed the contract? Like, I don't know all these things, but why one, interview or two does he say that he is not ready to go and now he's fighting? Like, that's got to be a bit of a red flag a little bit. And I'm not making excuses for Oliveira. I'm just mentioning how it's not ideal circumstances. Like, Oliveira has to be at his best in this fight to win this fight. And I think he can win. I do really feel that. I think he's well-rounded enough where he can maybe catch Islam or do something, but I just think a lot of the things are working against him here, including this one, which is that, like he said, he wasn't ready to take this fight. What are some other things as well? Charles also, the pressure has never been higher on Oliveira. It's one thing to lose the title and work your way back to it, but they're doing this rematch already with about a year since their first fight. Like I mentioned several times here, if he loses, what happens? Oliveira's screwed. And as far as I'm concerned, he's screwed in a lot of different ways. Yeah, I think he's too small for 170. He's big for lightweight, but I still think that at 170, I don't see him having a lot of success, especially against some of the top 5 guys, because there's a lot of big fighters at welterweight. And then maybe he could go to 145, but I think he's too big. Like, I've been next to him in person. Like, I don't know how he made 145 before, and it was a struggle for him last time. And even if he goes down, who do you got to fight? You got to Volkanovski, and you got to fight a lot of these other really good guys like Topuria. Like, I just think it would be very tough for him to do that. And then on top of that, like, I think if Islam beats Oliveira, I think the only guy who has the potential to maybe beat Islam now is Volkanovski, but I don't think that there's anyone right now that can defeat Islam other than maybe Arman if he works on a few things. But I think Islam probably stays champion for a while. So Oliveira would then put himself in the Max Holloway situation. And what Max Holloway's situation is that he's already lost 3 times to the champ. Like, he's not going to get another Volk fight, I don't think. Oliveira would be in the same boat here. And again, his best weight class for me anyways, from my opinion, is lightweight. And so again, let's kind of recap here. So 46% of Islam's win are by submission, so I think it's likely he wins by submission. Only 17 are by knockout. Don't think he's going to knock out Oliveira, though I think he can. 88% of Oliveira's losses have been by stoppage. Like I mentioned, it's in Abu Dhabi again. It's only 133 days since his last fight, which, again, all the traveling, going to, from Canada to Brazil, then Brazil to Vegas, and then from Vegas to Brazil, and then he's got to take this fight. The other thing is Islam knew he was going to fight in Abu Dhabi well in advance, so he knew no matter what, he was going to fight someone on the Abu Dhabi card, so he's had a lot of time to prepare. Charles, like I said, right here says he's not ready to fight, so that's not a good sign. And then, like I said, the pressure's on more than ever, because if he loses this, he's in a really tough spot here if he loses again. And I just think that's a lot of pressure to deal with. And I think the only way I think he can beat Islam is if everything's optimal. He's had plenty of time to prepare for the rematch. It's in a neutral territory. Like, those are ways that I think Oliveira could potentially win, like a lot of outside factors, but I think a lot is working against him here. And I think Islam will go out there and get the submission win. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Listen, I'm picking Islam. I don't want any flack about this. I don't want people nitpicking at certain details I made here. I'm giving him credit. I think he gets the win here. And I've always credited Islam, by the way, in case people think that it's the opposite. I think he's a great fighter. I think the fans can be a little nuts when it comes to analyzing his fights and anyone sort of critiquing them. But let's have a discussion here. I'd love to hear from you. And listen, if you're going to pick someone in this fight, I want to hear how you think they're going to win. It's easy to go out there and say, I'm picking this fighter, but tell me how you think the fight is going to play out. Let's have an honest discussion about this. I think it's an incredible fight, and I would love to chat about this fight with you, as long as you guys are being respectful. I know that's a lot to ask in the social media era these days, but I just think Islam has Charles's number. And I think even if things were optimal for Charles, I still think he has a small chance of winning this fight. So I'm going Islam Makhachev to get it done, and love to hear from you. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @LynchOnSports. If there's any other fights you want me to preview that are coming up that are booked, I will be doing, obviously, a preview of Paulo Costa and Khamzat Chimaev, which is also on this card. So look for that here soon. But wanted to get this one out of the way because big fight, lots to go through. And that's pretty much all I got to say. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. This has been another edition of Early Look.